Thank you very much to join us today on the WISE-Key Bulgaria IoT Cybersecurity Roundtable. We have the privilege today to have a very interesting group of speakers that all of them, they have amazing experience in different subjects which are related to what we call the fourth industrial revolution. Germans, they call that Industry 4, and it is basically the moment in history where humans are giving some powers to the machines as we are connecting 50 billion devices to the internet. So the challenges are enormous as nobody can predict what is going to happen. The decisions now are phenomenal as well because wrong decisions can have dire consequences in the future. And although around Davos this subject is being discussed at all type of levels, political level, economic, what that means in terms of the economy, what that means in terms of the technology, I think it was a good idea to bring the people in this roundtable to bring maybe one step ahead, which is, are we really ready in terms of cybersecurity to enter into this fourth industrial revolution? So I would like to just introduce myself. I am the founder of WISE-Key. WISE-Key is a Swiss company based in Geneva. WISE-Key has been in the front of everything related to cybersecurity for the last 17 years. I was previously to that the Chief Security Officer of the United Nations, so my job in the last 30 years has been protecting critical infrastructures. And in the last 17 years with WISE-Key, I have been working with governments, bank, industry to try to really bring to the internet something that the internet didn't have at the beginning, which is identification. When the internet was designed, the web and the internet, but mainly the World Wide Web, at that time the identity was not required. It was interconnections of machines that allow us to connect machines in a very easy way and browse to those machines. And also, obviously, consequences of that has been amazing breakthrough like Wikipedia with Jimmy and many other amazing projects that emerged on the top of the web. But the web was not designed to be a transactional mechanism. The web was not designed to produce a high authenticated transaction, dual factor authentication, asymmetric keys, connecting 50 billion objects to the internet. Imagine the consequences of connecting 50 billion objects on an infrastructure which is not secure. So we need to think in terms of cybersecurity, and what we have been saying in Davos during this edition, that IoT and the fourth industrial revolution will not happen if we don't solve the cybersecurity issue. So on that basis, I would like to introduce the panel. First, I would like to introduce, and it's a privilege for us, and the first time ever in the history of Davos, to have the President of the United States. So I would like to maybe give the microphone to every participant in the roundtable so they can introduce themselves briefly, and from there we will start to move into the subjects of the roundtable. So I give the microphone to Jimmy. Jimmy, please.
Yes. I'm Jimmy Wales, founder of Wikipedia. Obviously, cybersecurity is enormously important to us at Wikipedia, and one of my big things that I always like to talk about is the role that governments are playing in either supporting or undermining cybersecurity, and that's, for me, a very important issue.
Great. Maybe you go ahead. Yeah, just pass it on to so you guys introduce it briefly.
My name is Don Tapscott. I run a think tank and I'm an author. And these days, I've been working on something called the blockchain. Who's heard that term? Okay. 1993 or thereabout, you may have heard the word internet. You remember when you heard it. You may remember today for hearing this term blockchain. Because the internet, to me, is entering a second era. The first era was the internet of information. But you couldn't exchange value or money peer-to-peer without a powerful intermediary. These powerful intermediaries have large centralized computers that can be hacked. Because they're intermediaries, they can also capture a lot of the value of the internet. So we generate all this data, but it's not owned by us. We can't monetize it, and our privacy is being undermined. The second era is based on blockchain technologies, which is basically a massive distributed database. Think of a global spreadsheet. And this enables us to exchange value peer-to-peer. And this is going to be critical for cybersecurity because and I'd be happy to explain this, it's not hackable. And it also enables transactions at a very molecular level. So there's no way that that light, when it buys some power from a power grid, is going to go to a bank to settle the transaction. We have 50 billion, some people say 1 trillion inert objects all communicating with each other. They need to communicate and exchange value in a peer-to-peer way. And that light will have a reputation. And if that light always pays the power source, then the power source will continue to provide data to the light. So this is kind of a big deal, I think. And I'm happy to talk about it more.
Right.
Thank you, Dan. Gary Gaba, I say I'm an entrepreneur. I've built 3 companies. The latest company I just sold to CenturyLink, which is the 3rd largest telco. And this is very meaningful to us. 20% of the global internet data goes through our network. And as Carlos was talking about the infrastructure, we'll talk about how this entire space is going to evolve. If not tamed, it's going to be a wild, wild west. So I think it's very critical in terms of the topic and how collectively we can solve this problem.
Great, thanks, Gary. My name is David Ferguson. Carlos, it's a pleasure to be back here with you this year after a most intriguing and I think significant launch to the conversation about Fourth IR. Our organization monitors all the M&A activity and investment activity that happens around the world every day, and we try and make some sense of it. We'd like to understand what's happened and why it's happened, and most importantly, I think the investment community looks to us to try and understand what's going to happen next. Cybersecurity appeared as a little bit of a unicorn. Some of the horn came up above the surface about 24 months ago, which is when we began to pay attention to it. It had some very unique characteristics. It had a most unusual composition of investors. The valuations were significant and the volume was really beginning to percolate. And most importantly, underneath the surface of the 10 or 12 companies that were in the industry, there were 496 that nobody had ever heard of before. And so that's really what caught our attention. What I'm particularly interested in here, and yes, I never leave New York or London without a portfolio full of numbers to share, but what's of particular interest is what's going to happen to the value of businesses and the valuation for investment purposes of businesses going forward with the advent of this fourth industrial revolution. And so what an amazing collection of individuals that are assembled here today. And so I'm here as a contributor, but most certainly as a student of all of you.
Thank you, David. So just to summarize a bit the half of the roundtable, and before giving the floor to the other half, here we have people that they have developed amazing sites over the World Wide Web, like Jimmy with Wikipedia, which is, I think, is the number 1 or 2 website in the world in terms of traffic, or 5. 5, okay.
We're working on it.
But you're working on it. As I said to him before, imagine that Wikipedia becomes later also the platform for IoT. Could be an idea for the future because it's open source and nobody controls. So we have an amazing deployment there. Don is an inspirational. He has helped to leaders of the world, including myself, with books like The Digital Economy and others, to really to see the future. And he's doing it again now with blockchain, and we'll get into blockchain because blockchain for IoT could be the solution because scaling IoT is very difficult. And then we have Gary with his amazing company, $16 billion revenue, that basically what he does analytics on IoT. And then David with his financial background and merchant acquisition, telling us how this sector is becoming bigger than ever. As last year, for instance, investments in cybersecurity company has just rocketed. So now I'm going to go to the other side of the table, and the first is our partner and co-organizer of this roundtable, which is Bulgaria.
Guido Terreni, I'm the managing director for the watches of Bulgari. Everything started with Carlos just after Davos of last year. And he was very inspirational to us to make us understand that potentially we interact with watches in a different way than we do normally. And to talk about watches to a man is like talking about jewels to a lady. So it's nothing rational. It's nothing valuable in terms of really the intrinsic value of it is very important. But you don't buy a watch and you spend $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 to tell the time. You have it on your mobile phone. You have it everywhere. As you don't buy a Maserati to run faster in a queue in a town. So There are other motives for which you get into luxury. But there is one thing that probably can change the relation with the watch, is the fourth revolution. Because if it becomes an access to a virtual world that is protected, this is something that can be very important to look into. So it's very difficult to cope the emotional side, the luxury side, together with this functionality. Man already denied that 10 times cheaper technology and much more accurate technology during the time, which is quartz. And they went back to mechanical watches that are more expensive and less accurate. So at the end, it's not for that you buy a watch. And we're looking into observing the behaviors and be ready. And we have developed a connected watch with an NFC technology with WEF, which is secure, that I will be happy to talk about later.
Eugene Kaspersky, the cybersecurity company, and I hope that you have many customers here in the room. Thank you. Okay, in short, the cyber is everywhere around us, and actually this innovation changes the world, maybe even more than power, which changed the world, more than the modern transportation. So the cyber technologies, they really made this world absolutely different. Unfortunately, now we're facing the problem, security problem with that. And I call it the circle of innovation. First of all, there is innovation. Then we have a product technologies based on innovation. We are happy, we like it. And then we're facing the security issues. Hey, something going wrong. And the next is to fix the problem. That's why I call this time I call it the cyber middle age. Yeah, we have the technology, but still technology is not safe. There are many security issues with this technology which is invented, which we use all the time, and we really don't know how to design it. You don't know, I know, how to design it in a safe way. So that's why at the moment
we do with celebrities, actors like you, that has one of the largest ecosystem. When I met Kevin, I explained, Messi, the player, soccer player, makes $100 million in advertising on social media. What about him monetizing the millions of fans he has worldwide? So the first thing we do is issue an identity. The identity aspect of it is that every time anyone in the world downloads an app that has any relation either with him, his acting, or his companies, it will create an ecosystem. So the identity ecosystem is essential. While you're solving the problem of the identity ecosystem, which is mean penetration, then you can integrate that into a blockchain. The blockchain, the problem we're facing now is that it's still very immature. It's not yet. I mean, it's not like a product that you can install and say, okay, I work with a blockchain. That's not happening yet. And scaling the existing blockchain like Bitcoin is not possible. Bitcoin will not be able to scale into IoT, so something different needs to happen. But yes, I think the first step for anyone that are still on this impression that encryption and attacks are done by kids in a garage, this is actually more serious than that. Eugene, can you please give us some insight? Where are we today in terms of attacks? Who is attacking and where are they attacking?
Well, actually, where we're at the moment, the basic rule of security is that the security is good enough if the attack causes more than possible damage. So the attackers have a negative return on investment. So it's a basic rule. Unfortunately, right now we are far, far away from that. But what's going on is that technologies are getting better and better, and the blockchain, for example, it's good. And actually, they were talking about the next $20 transaction. Well, actually, technically, it's possible to do that, but it could be the most expensive $20 in the world. Most probably, you can buy the International Space Station on this $20. Cool. Yeah, and actually there are other technologies how to provide better security for all the kinds of their cyber users. For individuals, for enterprises, for industrial sector. By the way, before I come here, they asked me to talk only about individuals, only about consumer security, not about enterprises, not about the industrial, but we wanted to talk about the cyber warfare, which is also an issue. Actually, at the moment, we are living in a cyber middle age. We have the very good tools, but they are dangerous. It's like a middle age alchemist. So they are mixing all these different components to find the gold. Actually, they made many technologies, they made many innovations, but they didn't really know how to do that. So now with the new technologies, we're exactly at this stage. We have it, and still there's many innovations. Still the security is catching up. But at the same time, I think that, okay, so if we make the world safe and secure right now, it will kill competition. If we force everyone, every company, every vendor to make the security, to make the system, to make the product, services 100% secure, but more, so the attack is more expensive than the possible damage, it will cancel competition, because now the cyberspace is a boiling, it's a place of innovation, like the blockchain. Yes, it's a very new technology. And if we force them to do that, some others will be first to come to the market with the non-secure products, with the functionality and cheap products. So I'm afraid now in the consumer segment, the security is all the time is catching up. But I really respect the companies like WISE, which pay so much attention to security from the very beginning. And we're here, and actually many thanks for the fact that they were able to adapt other technologies and to bring the technology to the product so quick that my engineers, they were really surprised. I said, what did they do? How quick they are? It's a big surprise. It's a very good example of the vendor which use our technologies, our SDK, for technical term, and they did it perfect, quick, and we are happy to be a partner with the company.
It's an honor for us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I think this is a great combination. Two European cybersecurity company teaming towards the next biggest cybersecurity breakthrough, which is going to be in IoT. But one question to you: many of the discussions I ask you, what keeps you awake at night? And you mentioned about energy, the fact that somebody could shut down the energy infrastructure in the United States, and you are so involved about energy with maybe the biggest brain in that subject in your board. Maybe give us some insight. What are you discussing on a daily basis? What are the steps are you taking as advisors to the government to avoid that to happen? I mean, are we in a situation where we could, in few months, say that a hacker was able to shut down the entire electrical grid of a city or a state?
Yes, it is unfortunately true that utilities, power generation companies, and so forth have been, at a very primitive level, aware of the nature of the threat, and many, for self-interest, have gone quite far in bringing really sophisticated protection measures to encrypt everything in their communications, but also between pieces of hardware that are so critical to their operations. We're talking about boilers communicating with turbines, communicating with generators, and so forth. Well, we are finding that it has been feasible for young people, especially, to figure out how to penetrate these systems, although they are encrypted, with state-of-the-art encryption, and to be able to interfere with the communication between the boilers, the generators, and so forth, and cause literally the meltdown of a plant. Well, we're finding, thanks to companies like yours, Carlos, how governments can not quite deter, but at least prevent deep penetration that will compromise the effectiveness of electricity, to keep the lights on, literally. However, as a government, you run into problems on enacting, making law of the right thing to do. And the reason is that in a country, and Europe is equivalent, where you have 2,000 electricity companies with 5,000 generating plants, you find that some of them are privately owned. And when the government begins to tell them, they say, how to do their business, they say, well, that's going to cost money for us. Who's going to pay for that? And our shareholders are at risk at some level about the safety of our operations. So you get into this dichotomy between what is best for the country and the common good versus the self-interest of a given company. Well, it's a kind of thing that can be overcome, but when you get to cases, it's been 8 years now that we've been trying to work in the House and the Senate of the United States on a bill that will be acceptable and enactable into law to provide a framework for standards, rules, accountability, and state-of-the-art protection that you can actually implement. And you do find in isolated cases, and this is specific tests the government has run, that you're still not getting things that were already implanted into your encrypted systems. So you're still vulnerable even though you may be instituting a new regime today. So this dichotomy between, as the professor described, privacy, private ownership, the national interest, and who determines that. But it isn't easy to do the right thing even once you figure out what it is that's right. We have a bill in the House and the Senate now that we think in the US will enable the kind of overarching set of standards, rules, accountability that can work. Well, we think it will deal with things over the horizon even, quantum computing and this sort of thing. Well, we're still not sure. And we're still getting quite a lot of pushback by people, sensibly minded, accountable to their shareholders. So freedom has its drawbacks. I think we'll get over it, but it'll probably be a couple of years.
Thank you very much, Brad. So maybe just to go to the other stream on cybersecurity, which is analytics. I mean, there are ways also now, and maybe the solution will go to that point, whereby studying the behavior of people, by studying their data, because a lot of data, I mean, people leave always a digital footprint, where we all have a digital footprint already being established. And the behaviors are now being observed as a possibility to anticipate a potential threat. I'll give you an idea. The other day, 4 guys were filming a shopping mall in Canada. And the detection cameras detected 4 persons just taking pictures everywhere. Those cameras were already programmed to detect that actually if people take pictures out of the blue to a wall, to a shopping mall, and those pictures are taken by certain type of persons, then they should flag some type of alert system. So all that is intelligence that is moving towards analytics. There's also a process where machines are becoming more intelligent. Actually, one of the things engineers always tell me, in 10 years' time, maybe we don't need software developers anymore because the machines themselves will be able to auto-program themselves because they will have the intelligence to do. So this is actually a paradigm shift towards analytics. And here we have Gary. Gary runs a very large company, NASDAQ listed. And this company is an analytics company, CenturyLink. So Gary, what are you doing to alert your clients that there's going to be potential threat just by analyzing their behavior?
Thank you, Carlos. But before I really get into it, I just want to maybe make comments on some of the earlier pieces. So if you look at IoT is truly creating a tipping point. And I go back to Darwin's theory. You got to adapt, evolve, and survive. And truly, I think with the IoT is going to create a lot of opportunity, but at the same time it's creating a huge amount of challenges. And that's something all of us need to be aware of and need to figure out how we attack that problem versus after the fact. And they're a combination of things, right? Blockchain is still evolving. Obviously, if you look at the overall competition power, it's a different ballgame right now. Now with this immense amount of data being generated, the machine learning and AI techniques go to a different level. And that's going to become very critical because as humans, we cannot analyze that amount of data. And this is where the deep learning and the AI techniques become super critical. If you look at CenturyLink, 20% of the global internet data goes through our network. We are part of the only 3 companies in the US which has the highest level of government clearance. I can't share some things. We know before anybody else knows. We are part of President Obama's, or President Underwood's NASDAQ subcommittee. So there's good amount of data available, and more enriched the data set gets, it becomes easier. And we just announced a collaboration agreement with WISEKey, how we deliver value to the customers. Going back to Carlos' points of 50 billion connected things. Think about what IoT is doing. IoT is creating a bigger cyber threat because now you have a lot of insertion points to create a cyber attack. And this is where the cryptographic key becomes critical. And just to share another fact, which I was not aware, 43% of the global foreign exchange traffic goes through our network. So, we have access to data which will help us innovate. And next decade is going to be innovation dream for the entrepreneurs. What we are talking today, literally 12 months down the line, there will be a lot more innovation to help solve this problem. But in short, this amount of data giving us a much enriched data set, leveraging the deep learning AI techniques, we can truly make a change. Think about healthcare, right? Some of the innovations happening.
This is becoming a massive industry. People are making billions of dollars. This is going to be bigger than anything before, social media, whatever. So maybe on the two extreme, first, how big is this industry from David? And then back to Jimmy and say, Jimmy, is maybe the only way to do that by replicating what you and Team Lee did on the web and not really trying to over-monetize those new platforms, inventions? Maybe David first.
No, Carlos, we agreed you weren't going to ask me that question because I don't have the answer to that.
Yeah, try.
And it's truly a challenge, and we're working at it. I can tell you. What I can tell you is that over the past 12 months, what we believed was going to happen happened. So that the number of companies that went from obscure to visible, the number of alliances, the M&A activity was significant during the past 12 months. It doubled. A couple things happened that we weren't expecting, that we weren't paying attention to, and that was the amount of IoT technology investment as a result of cross-border M&A, cross-border from one country to another. And why is that happening? Well, it's happening predominantly because the success of IoT, the success of the fourth industrial revolution is dependent upon alliances. It's about collaboration, like Kaspersky and WISeKey, like Bulgari and WISeKey. And this, I believe, is going to have a dramatic effect on the geopolitical landscape, and something that you and I have talked about over the past couple of years, and I think will be a part of our conversation significantly going forward. What's interesting to look at in terms of those numbers is what was the least sexy of all sectors over the last 5 years that we've truly been focused on all of this M&A and investment activity, which was insurance. Nobody cared. I couldn't assemble an audience of big thinkers, brilliant minds, significant investors to come and talk about insurance if I paid them $100,000 they had to assemble. It just wasn't of interest. Today, it's the single most important, the single highest volume sector that I'm asked about for a couple of reasons. One, there are as a sector, it has exceeded fintech in the volume of hacking and the cost of hacking because of the data that the insurance companies are holding. This is largely being driven by healthcare. Second, that the industry really hasn't figured out how to insure against cyber attacks. There are 50 different offerings in the market today globally, and I think if you lined up the executives of each of those companies, they would tell you they haven't figured it out yet. And in a recent survey that I saw of 1,000 leading corporate CEOs, they believe that they are underserved by the insurance and undercompensated when attacks are occurring. So it's a significant issue.
Yeah.
And IoT is a complete game changer because now we move beyond individuals to organizations, to products that are interfacing with one another. Eugene, it was a question that I had fed for you coming out of this session today. Maybe I'll throw it over to you. My company is not a client, but you've scared me enough. I texted while I was sitting here, and we're switching this afternoon.
So, one second, please. We come back. Maybe just to Jimmy on that question. Profit versus not-for-profit, making money versus not making money on this.
Well, I mean, I think what I would ideally like to see is I'd like to see Kevin become fantastically wealthy from his investment in WISeKey. I want to see Eugene become fantastically wealthy, and then I want you all to retire as we solve the security issues. That may be a dream, but right now we need real investment in cybersecurity in every aspect of it. Real money needs to be spent. It's incredibly important, and as in terms of when we think about Tim Berners-Lee's innovation, what he did, what's really important about his work has been it's about open standards.
Yeah.
And so open standards, I don't want to see you and Eugene sort of going off in different directions, developing incompatible things. I want all the systems to be interoperable. I want there to be clear standards so that everybody can improve security. And on that base, just as Google, Yahoo, everybody is, they're all functioning on the open standards of the World Wide Web, there's room for competition and there's room for profit making, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. People need incentives to get things done. I'm just a weirdo, so.
Correct. Just
On that, because Tim is there. Tim, will you accept that question for me? Okay.
I guess.
I will ask you. You are the founder of the World Wide Web. I mean, you are basically the person that has a lot with that invention, for all that to happen. We will not be here in this room talking about this if you didn't invent the web. What is your vision for the future? I mean, how do you want to see IoT plug it into your baby and make it as unconditional as the one you designed originally? What would you do? What is the advice you give to us?
Well, as Jimmy said, the web works because of open standards. It's because people realized that at each layer came along, the GCP layer, the HTTP layer, they realized this is going to make a whole big new market if the standards are open, if there is zero cost to starting a new idea in a space, whether I'm in my garage or I'm in a big company. So they realized that there has to be a royalty-free space, and so the companies who could have had patents and could have stood people around the space of how the standards by which the computers will talk to each other, the languages used like HTTP, they all backed off. They made a pact. We have the Web Consortium has a patent policy where everybody backs off and they say this is going to be a royalty-free space. That's important at every layer for the new things like the Open Web Platform. It's really important. For obviously the Internet of Things is really important, and standards are going to be really important. We've got at the web level standards work going on. Can come talk to me about it. The part of the standards work is just in your company. There are going to be so many different things from different companies that just keeping track of them, just designing a taxonomy of all the different things which there can be out there, keeping track of them, and then understanding the interfaces they support. On a good day, they will support common interfaces. On a bad day, they will support proprietary interfaces, and you're going to have to put in special shims stuck in little wedges in between the proprietary stuff you've bought and the open stuff which your company is actually building to run on, which you've got to connect everything together. So I'm hoping that we'll also see standards at the general level, at the IoT level, and in each domain for each type of device, each type there's going to have to be a bunch of standards in each. But those standards will be done in those domains by the companies particularly involved in that.
Just stay there 1 second. When I was in the UN and you invented the web, we were the first website. Actually, we were using Gophers before, before you came with the World Wide Web. And it was an amazing excitement because it was so easy to interconnect websites and basically to share knowledge. But what was your thinking in terms of security? Did you ever thought at that time about security, or did you ever projected what your invention could lead towards a cybersecurity once you have now 6 billion people connected?
So back in those days, that was the days when Gopher was more exciting than the web.
Correct.
Why did Gopher, by the way, just saying, why did Gopher die? Because the University of Minnesota said it might not be patent free. Everybody dropped it like hot potato and ran towards the web. CERN said, you know what, the web will be patent free. So great example from the Gopher system. So then, in those days, people imagined that operating systems would be proven correct by computer. So nobody would be able to hack into them. They were all very secure operating systems. In those days, RSA had produced this cryptographic breakthrough which would allow you to have a public key, have 2 numbers, so that one number is secret and only you ever see it, and you can put it in your watch or wherever you want to put it, and the other number you can broadcast to everybody else, so your identity can have this global identity. And I think a lot of us felt that's going to nail it. Of course, that's the technology we use to log into things remotely. It's the way we know that when we click to our bank, it's really our bank. It's public cryptography. That said, when you look at the IoT, what we've realized since then, over the last 25 years, is that actually these computer systems are not provably correct. So there will always be the cat and mouse game. However smart you think you've been, there is somebody desperately being paid a lot of money to figure out exactly where you've slipped up. And so one of the things I say, well, for example, it's great to have a smart watch, it's great to have smart things out there, Internet of Things. But the only reason things are secure right now for your laptop or your phone is because they can be uploaded. When they can be reloaded to the new version, an upgraded version of the operating system overnight. And maybe even something happens very quickly. Maybe people will text around this room and people will download the latest version of their phone system if there's a real panic. The world has to be able to, when there's a flaw is found, then the world works by upgrading all their laptops and all their phones. Can you upgrade? Does your Bulgari watch have an connection to the internet? If Bulgari find a bug in that software, have they got a way of uploading with all these little things which are smaller and smaller and smaller? Again, will they be smart enough actually to have operating systems which allow them to be reloaded? Those are that's the world in which we are now, and that's the one which maybe doesn't fit very well with the Internet of Things.
Thank you very much. It's a great vision from the industry, and on that, because Bulgari is maybe one of the first luxury companies that is really paying attention to this to protect their consumers. But this has a component which is protecting the consumer. Kevin wants to be protected as a user of the internet, but not only him. I mean, everybody wants to be protected. Bulgari has developed a Bolt, we call it Bulgari Bolt, which is actually updatable cloud encryption data that goes to encrypted cloud, and we are in cooperation with Kaspersky actually launching this activity. But how important is it for you as a brand to protect your customers?
Well, definitely is very important. I mean, last year the topic in watchmaking was very hot around the connectivity of the watch, and the industry went towards, in my opinion, a gadget approach, no? While a wealthy customer is much more interested in protecting his wealth and in having a luxury item. A luxury item, first of all, is not obsolete. You cannot have a luxury watch that after 6 months doesn't work anymore with something connected. So this was the first challenge. That is why we did not put any electricity in our watch. It has to be 100% mechanic, have to be 100% Swiss, which is, and therefore we patented this NFC.
It's a watch, baby.
The NFC into the watch, and we are the only brand who was able to make so. Now there are certain limits because not having energy, the chip is getting the energy from the device which he's interacting with. So you cannot have a lot of power on that, first of all. Then, second point is that in a watch you have conductive metals. So conductive metals interfere with the NFC. So that's why we used magnesium, we used ceramic, and the chip is inside the ceramic bezel. Now, where we were disappointed was in the standards. The evolutions of the smartphones were unpredictable to us, because the Samsung 5, for instance, is much more able to interact with the watch than the 6. And who knows what the 7 will do. So I cannot put on the market a watch that 6 months after, there is no certainty that it will continue to work just because you change your phone. So this is one of the topics that you raised. You need to, if you want the practical life to become connected, you need to make a living easy for the customer too, because you cannot just accept that, okay, yours is obsolete, buy another thing. That's too easy. You have to face a continuity of the offer and facing the need, no? Because we're talking about a luxury watch. We're not talking about a watch of $400. We're talking about a watch about $5,000. And if the use would be, for instance, in members of the board that need to exchange private encrypted information, and the watch becomes your key, probably those kind of people want a platinum watch. And how can I be offering to a market a connected item with a traditional technology like watchmaking is? This is the big debate we're working on. we're very keen on the security of our customers. That is why the Bulgari Vault will be launched aside from the watch to be available to every fan of the brand. And this will allow to store encrypted information, like your passwords, like any information, your testament if you want, anything that can be really valuable to you in a totally secure way, and then hopefully many more things in the future.
So thank you very much. So because the time and because I don't want to really leave you with a lunch, if you have to return back to the country. So I will just open the floor to some questions. We'll have about 50 minutes questions with the audience. So please, short questions with short answers, and from there at 1:30 we'll go all to have a lunch and procedure like that. So. Questions, there's a microphone. Yeah, first question. Yeah, go ahead, please. Introduce yourself briefly and ask the question to the table.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Zitrin. I teach on internet law at Harvard University, but feel as ignorant as everybody else who has advertised ignorance. But I just want to make 2 points. One, following on Don and Jimmy and Tim, the fact of interoperability really seems important for Internet of Things, and I think the central question for that is, when you buy an internet-connected thing, will it be able to talk to any other thing, or will it only talk to its vendor? And the prospect of buying a refrigerator that you're going to keep for 20 years, and it only keeps Pepsi cold, not Coke, because it's a Pepsi refrigerator, that seems crazy.
Correct.
And I don't take for granted that we will have this world as we do with the web and the Internet of Interoperability. So just wanted to make that point of, this is a real problem to figure out that nobody's figured out yet.
Correct.
And the second point, just about the blockchain, which I agree is as baffling as Don and Jimmy say it is, one idea behind it is having every transaction be public. People can validate and look at what's happening. That seems great.
Yeah.
The other idea behind it has a neat kind of how did we get here observation to it, which is the point of a distributed blockchain is that we can't trust anyone or any single institution. So in order to figure out how to do something trusted, we have to come up with an idea that millions of computers independently have to work in order to get trust, and they do so with this thing called proof of work, where they just have to dig a hole and fill it again, digitally speaking, which has some interesting carbon footprint implications, talk about weird. And also just the idea that really, is there no one?
You said the terrorist attacks in Paris, that the terrorists didn't use encrypted messages or communication. And I think this raises a bit the impression that terrorists would not use encrypted communication, which I think is very wrong. So maybe you could correct your statement on that. Or maybe Mr. Kospersky
Is that true?
could help us out on that. The FBI director has said at a Congress hearing that they cannot indeed follow encrypted messaging the way they want it, so there seems to be a problem.
Yep.
And if I could ask Mr. Spacey as well, you mentioned that the hacking of Sony was a great incident and it affected you personally. Could you tell us which way it affected you personally? Thank you very much.
So my point is not that terrorists won't use encrypted platforms. My point is it doesn't matter. They will use whatever platforms, and it's actually really, really, really easy to hide from the police, even if you're communicating openly. I mean, if you've seen any modern gangster show, the bad guys get burner cell phones. They can easily open up a brand new Gmail account. They can communicate openly. They can't watch everything everywhere. You speak, in a roundabout way with code words. Gangsters been doing this for a very, very long time. And breaking encryption on the theory that this is going to make us safe from terrorists is just not a good bet. We need a secure internet. So that was really my point. Of course.
I'm an academic on the globalization of Apple, so I come across a lot of startups, especially in your space. My question is, there's one of the startups I'm looking at which only uses the internet to ping the next device, but will be connected straight away, machine to machine or device to device, leaving everything else out. It's coming out on the market very shortly. What does that mean to all the security issues and questions? The good and the bad news, and they're both going to be affected.
Yeah,
There are two things on devices. One is the communication of devices, so there's going to be tons of ways of connecting those devices. Another thing is the identification of the device itself, and whatever operating system Tim was saying that needs to be updated endless to prevent any potential attacks. So you always need to put security on the device, regardless how you connect the device. Another question, we are very short time, so short question please, gentlemen there. Some microphone for...
I can shout now.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay.
Go ahead. I don't know what.
So my name is John Neal. I'm chairman of the Unipart Group. The question I have is, Western governments are now insisting on a backdoor being placed into the software that some of the companies are producing. What do you think the implications of that are for the future development of the industry, where other countries are not going to make that requirement?
Backdoor requirement.
Well, actually, I am in the software security business for 26 years, and actually I saw only a couple of times when the backdoors were really implemented into the commercial software. So actually they are espionage tools, they're working mostly for the independent malware, independent attacks. It's like expensive for the attackers to design this than to implement it into the commercial software. And actually this question I think is related to the encryption. And I think that to have the backdoor for encryption tools, it's a bad idea, because sooner or later the bad guys will find it and they will use it in their own needs.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it's a bad idea. First of all, I think it's not possible to ban encryption, because everyone uses it. I use it as well, because the businessmen and the travel, they have a VPN to communicate. That's why it's a must. It's not possible to ban it. It's as not possible as to ban laptops. United States wanted to ban laptops on the transatlantic flights. Come on! It's not possible. Same here.
We have one question more, and after that I would like to give the participants just maybe one advice. I mean, we are in Davos. This is the time where Klaus Schwab has announced that the fourth industrial revolution is happening. It might take a few years to really happen, but this is the time when we will be maybe 20 years older. We can look back and say, one day I was in Davos when the fourth industrial revolution was started, and I was actually party to that breakthrough. So one question more, and after we'll give the micro to all the panelists again to close, because we're going to have a lunch. Just very concrete advices from their expertise fields that they can give to us, so we can take care on basically construct a better infrastructure, a better world through IoT cybersecurity. Sir?
Yeah, I'm Phil Graham, and I'm in finance, and my knowledge of technology is I have an iPhone. But I know bad ideas when I hear them. One bad idea is having the government put together a program and have Congress adopt it to provide a security system for public utilities. I think that would be a disaster. You could make a big mistake. You could spend billions of dollars, and the thing might not work. Secondly, any debate about separating the profit motive from solving this problem is absurd. If this problem is solved, it's going to be solved at a profit. If America is saved, it's going to be saved at a profit. If you take away the profit motive, things don't happen.
Absolutely. So I go to the floor again, and maybe, as I say, just 1 minute, because we have more than that. Very concrete advices, things that we can quantify, and next year we can say, okay, that advice was followed. I was maybe wrong or right, but at least we have some kind of blueprint for starting to activate this fourth industrial revolution. I start with the university, academia.
So as academia, also education.
Education.
I think we want to protect consumers, companies. We should start to teach at school how to use social networks, internet technology. I'm always surprised when I go also to high school to talk about cybersecurity, the gap between the way young generation using all this technology and the lack of knowledge about the risk of this technology. So it concerns not only teenagers, but also teachers at school. So I think there's a need, if you want to make citizen 2.0, I mean, like democracy 2.0, we need also to change the way we teach this technology. We are not only users, we also have to be a thinker of this technology. This is the only way to prevent and to limit the risks for citizens, company, and for consumers.
Thank you.
But
We're entering an era when we're facing a new ideology, and this gets to not technology so much as our ability to think apparently contradictory in this misguided minority. Well, that misguided minority doesn't seem very significant. However, it's close on to several 100,000 people. Leadership must be able to discern and make the argument over the fact that there is a very tiny minority of truly evil people, and to engage with those who are not, the 99+% of Muslims, and to engage them to come forward and to identify this tiny minority and deal with it. And while we're getting to that happy state, law enforcement as well as intelligence agencies have to have the ability to use the systems, offensive technologies, that can enable you to disable the kinds of threats we're talking about today before they become palpable and effective. But that, too, is a matter of leadership and competence and the ability to stand up and defend both points of view. Yes, the vast majority of the Muslim world is entirely benign. Yes, there is a tiny minority, and we must go after and destroy it. And we're going to do it while maintaining the civil rights of the communities of the free world. But deal with it. And leadership is becoming a much more courageous proposition nowadays.
Leadership. Eugene.
Recently I was just checking my old data on computer and I found my very old presentation. And I found that 20 years ago the impact from the cybercrime on the global economy was estimated like a few $1 billion a year. Last year, so 20 years ago, it was a few $1 billion, say $2 or $3 billion a year. Last year we were investigating with Europol. It was a successful investigation on the one gang, and we had the number that they probably had $1 billion stolen from bank accounts worldwide. One gang, $1 billion. Well, that was a good gang. So there within 20 years, you had a question about what's next. In the 20 years from now, what we are. Everyone is wearing their Bulgari watch, of course, using their Vaisky products, of course. And well, 20 years ago, it was as a few $1 billion. Now it's much more expensive. So the environment is getting more aggressive. And of course, we have to pay much more attention to the cybersecurity because it's reality that we're living in a different world. So it's not only about computers, it's smartphones as well. In the future, smart TV, you're watching TV and TV is watching you. Yes, why not? That watches their any other devices, Internet of Things, industrial sector, transportation, financial services. So I'm afraid that, well, I'm not afraid, that's reality. We have to pay much more attention to security. And thanks everyone who is right now here in the room, listening to us. And well, I'm paranoid, you know, but that's reality.
You will survive.
But we will survive.
Thank you. Well, I was thinking that if we want to get to those 50 billion connected products, probably we have to also go away from a partial mindset. No? Take Apple that is not opening NFC. This is a limit towards, because they want to create their own ecosystem. So if you really want to make people...
I've got nothing. I think I've said my piece, so...
Encrypted message.
Just on Kevin's thoughtful point, I think we're going to need a new social contract. When we went from the agrarian age to the industrial age, we developed a whole new set of understandings. People had to be literate, public education. We figured out that you needed to have anti-monopoly legislation, the right for unions to organize. We figured out that that private or public companies ought to report stuff occasionally to their shareholders and so on. I don't think we've done any of that for this transition today. I wanted to just close picking up on Jonathan's thoughtful question about who can you trust. And about 20 years ago, a cryptographer, a very famous and capable cryptographer named Nick Szabo, wrote a paper called the God Protocol. And this is really important for the Internet of Things. Who are we going to trust to keep this secure and to manage these trillions of transactions that will happen between all these devices? And he said, imagine if you have the ultimate protocol, that you put an input into it, and then it would act with great integrity and always do the right thing and handle that transaction or do the output, and it would keep it secure for everyone. It would manage all of this stuff. And many years later, it may not be the God protocol, but I think that we do have emerging this thing called a trust protocol. That to me, the Internet of Everything needs a ledger of everything. And it's a ledger that's got to be open source, like Tim said. It's got to be distributed, because you can't count on a bank to be managing the transaction between a light and a power grid. And also, by distributed, it's going to be more secure. You need it to use the highest level of encryption. You need it to be peer-to-peer. And I think that that's what's emerging today. Now, people call me a futurist. I'm not a futurist. My view is that the future is not something to be predicted, it's something to be achieved. And I think that somehow the technology genie has escaped from the bottle. It's been summoned by this unknown person or persons called Satoshi Nakamoto, and it is giving us another kick at the can to do this right and to create a much more secure and richer information environment where we can trust each other and trust clever code that enables the world to function in a way that we don't have to rely on some big corporation or some big government to always do the right thing. So my recommendation is, let's explore this further. I'm an advocate, I'm not a futurist. I think I'm advocating for a certain new technology that I think holds vast new promise. Now there's also a lot of peril too, and we've got to manage that.
Thank you, Don. Short, please.
No, thank you. Thank you. I would say, as I said earlier, both IoT and cybersecurity is creating a humongous opportunity, and it's going to catalyze innovation like no tomorrow. But then it boils down to people. Education becomes important. We don't know what we don't know. So education becomes critical to understand how to leverage some of these new concepts which are coming up. So for the corporations, right, ensuring that you have a chief security officer and you are really on forefront of the IoT and cybersecurity, how you optimize it. For entrepreneurs, right, this is like your kids in a candy shop in terms of the innovations you can do. To drive for academia, you can create a mega role in terms of educating the next generation of leaders and entrepreneurs coming up. It's a huge opportunity, and just education, leveraging the technology and adapting.
Kevin, I can't agree with you more about the necessity of preparedness and education and how we prepare this next generation is a great concern. I'm going to leave you with just one thought, and that is the transformation of the value of companies that you work for, that you work with, that supply the soda, that deliver packages to your house. All that's changing. The security of these organizations, because it's necessary for them to be aligned in the fourth industrial revolution, and their preparedness for and ability to participate in the IoT changes the value of businesses transformationally forever.
Thank you very much. So just to conclude, Professor Schwab, in his book on the fourth industrial revolution, say that we're going to be transferring a lot of power to machines. And one of the things we're going to be transferring is our brain, because machines are going to be more intelligent than we're going to be very soon. But humans still will have two things the machine will never have, is the heart and the soul. And it's with those two other things, together with our brain, that we can create a better society. So I would like to thank you very much for your presence. Thank to the speakers, this amazing table. Thank you also, and let you know that we're going to have the Swiss Knife Friday. You're all invited. A lot of the persons, including Bulgari and CenturyLink, will be with us because they are co-organizers this year. Kevin will come to say hello because he's being over-demanded already in Davos. But it's another way for you to continue exploring WISeKey. WISeKey has organized this roundtable for the last 5 years. We have been pushing the agenda, and we are helping the World Economic Forum to really execute on this amazing vision on the fourth industrial revolution. Thank you very much to everybody.
Wonderful to listen to. John, I'm going to go back and read some of the things that I left behind. And I don't know anything about blockchain, so it sounds like well, let's see if we can get your son on our stage in April.
By the way, this is your wife. She can help you to organize that.
Can I give you my card?